We are taking you to the wonderful seaside town of Antibes in the south of France. It's along the shores of Provence. This entire stroll through the village of Antibes only takes a couple of hours into this pedestrian zone of the Old Town of Antibes and stroll about for an hour or two, maybe sit at a café, grab some lunch. It's such a small town, you're probably not spending the night in Antibes. You certainly could. There are some small hotels here, but more likely you're using a bigger city as a home base, such as Nice, which is what we prefer. On this trip, we're staying in the city of Nice for 4 nights. It's just 20 kilometers away from Antibes with very frequent train service. You have easy access from the Nice train station to many points along the coastline. And to get from Nice to Antibes by train only takes about 20 minutes. So that's very convenient. The trains run very frequently, usually 2 or 3 every hour, so it's a short wait. The trains are very comfortable, and as long as you're avoiding rush hour, they're generally not crowded. And there's beautiful scenery out the window as well. And Antibes is a significant town, so a lot of the trains do stop here. Upon arriving, you'll see the Antibes station is right in town, and then it's a short walk from the Antibes train station to get into the village proper. Just walk straight out of the train station, 2 blocks along Avenue de la Libération to the Marina, and continue along Avenue de Verdun past the Marina to a gate in the city wall that will lead you into the Old Town, which is a small area just several hundred yards long and wide, but wonderful to explore and riddled with dozens of tiny lanes. As usual, we'll be sharing tips about how to get the most out of your visit. Mega yachts, all pleasure crafts, some fishing boats, and in the distance you see a fortress. That's Fort Carré. It looks like it's on an island from here, but it's a peninsula. We're going to walk along the water for about a quarter mile, and then we'll go that way into the old town. Typical of a wealthy Riviera coastal town, the Marina is just filled with beautiful yachts. There's sailboats and motorboats, and some of them are moored here permanently. Others are just passing through. Before diving into the old town, it's kind of nice to walk out to the shoreline, just around the bend to this observation terrace. Get a beautiful view looking out on the sea. Antibes was once a fortified village, like most of the other towns in the south of France, with the original wall running along the shore. It's a medieval fortified town still yet. It's a fascinating town with a great history that goes back 2,500 years at least. We'll be spending quite a bit of time here in the program, walking through the little lanes and showing you the markets, the shoreline, the old buildings, and the people. The map gives you a quick idea of the route we're taking, walking through the little lanes into the main square, down a lovely shopping pedestrian lane, circling back over to the Picasso Museum, and then back through the little lanes again, kind of a circular route to see things twice or 3 times even in some cases, and then out to the train station. Anytime you're entering an ancient seaside village through a massive archway in the old stone wall, you know you're in for some beautiful historic sights coming up, as we will soon see. When you first get inside the walls of the old town, you'll find there's still some automobile traffic. There's some busy streets, there's cars going by, but just continue. Even here is very interesting and lovely. The cars are not going very fast, but keep walking, and within a couple more blocks, you will finally get to the pedestrian-only zone. If you walk straight a few blocks, you will find a peaceful residential neighborhood of narrow pedestrian alleys where you might get a little lost. It's just a couple of narrow lanes lined with lush plants that provide a little breather before plunging back into the commercial district. Turn left to Rue Albernon, which will lead you into the heart of the old section and quickly to the Cour Masséna, the main food market. Notice the arches in several side alleys linking the buildings together to help support each other, as if holding hands. We'll be getting into the busy part of the old town with its shops and beautiful squares in just a little while. But first, we like to start out in these quiet little alleys, old bricks covered with colorful ivy, and there's a few shops, a few restaurants, and a residential feeling to this initial neighborhood. You'll walk by some open doors and you're welcome to have a peek inside. Here's a carpenter workshop, fascinating with all of his tools. This is a charming neighborhood, very quiet, and it's a pedestrian zone even for the houses. So these people walk to get to their house. Well, it's fun to get off the beaten track now and then to see how people live in their residential areas. At the center of the old town, you will find the Placa National. It is the place to go if you want to sit down and have a drink, or you can have a nice meal at one of the many restaurants around the place. It's always a place for people watching, for the rendezvous, to hang out for a while, to sit down and rest, recharge. And the rest of the old town is immediately all around it. Within about 4 blocks, you've got all of the sights to see. And some days the Place Nationale is the host to the flea market. You can rummage around here, maybe look for some clothing bargains, get some knickknacks, find some local curios, or just do some more people watching. You'll find that the locals are quite friendly.
Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour. C'est joli.
Beautiful.
Because Place Nationale is right at the center of the old town, you'll find that a variety of fascinating streets lead off from it in all directions. Some of them are quite narrow, just for pedestrians, and others are a little wider, such as the main Rue de la République. That street runs alongside the main place and leads into the new part of town, lined with more shops and bars and restaurants. One of the nicest pedestrian streets you'll find in the center, just a block off Place Nationale, is Rue James Close. This narrow pedestrian route is lined with boutiques and restaurants that are so cute, you just might want to drop anchor at a sidewalk cafe and sample the local grinds. One of the regional food treats of the south of France is soca, which is a crepe, and yet it's made from chickpea flour. So it's really hearty and tasty. It's good for you. It's a nutritious snack. It's not junk food by any means. And it's really different than the standard crepe, which is made from flour, wheat flour. This is really quite a special thing, and of course you can have different toppings on it, or just have it plain. There's so much flavor in the chickpea, you don't need any special toppings. You don't need any sugar or jam or anything. Just a plain soca is really a satisfying treat. And it's especially found in the Ligurian area, anywhere from Nice around the coastline into Italy down to Pisa. These few blocks in the center are really some of the sweetest in the entire Riviera. And this very old shopping street is kind of a forerunner of today's modern shopping malls. These streets have always been too narrow for cars, so it's been a pedestrian zone from the beginning. Walking along on Rue James Close is almost like strolling through an outdoor museum. The shop fronts are so interesting. You don't find the big chain stores here. They're all little boutiques. They've got antiques, clothing, furnishings, and artworks. Well, lucky us, we happened to be visiting just as the Beaujolais Nouveau was being released. It's that annual event.
More for Peter.
It happens in the fall, and what happens generally is the wine shops will offer free tastings of the Beaujolais Nouveau. They'll set up the barrel out on front, and you notice even the shop owner gets in with the spirit of the day and joins you in a drink. It's really a friendly and festive atmosphere when they're giving away wine. And so, of course, you want to join in the spirit of the event and participate and perhaps even buy a bottle for later on. Or maybe you'll get a takeout sandwich from one of the small convenience stores here and sit down on a step and watch the people walk past from your own little sidewalk perch. That's a very economical way to eat. You know, even in expensive towns, such as along the French Riviera, you can always find a takeout sandwich place and get an inexpensive meal that is going to cost you under €5 and get a soft drink to go with it, find a place to sit, and enjoy a very inexpensive meal. Of course, you do want to have some good foods on your travels as well, but often at lunch, you're just moving along, you don't have a lot of time, and you just want to grab something quick and simple. As you wander enough of these little lanes, you're bound to run into some unique moments, such as this proud artist shooting a little video demo of his works, and intriguing little lanes and tunnels to lure you along. Rue James Close will lead you to the main pedestrian shopping street of town, Rue de la République, another fascinating route for walking. By now you're beginning to get the picture of the good life in Europe. It's walking, it's the promenade, it's the cafe, it's the pastry shop, it's the food market. It's all the things that we don't have in most American places, unfortunately. We're a little bit behind the times. You know, just that experience of walking around, seeing your friends, having a chat, having a coffee, that's a big part of life here. And from these central streets around the main square, it's quite easy to walk over a couple of blocks to the famous food market, the Cour Massena. Another lovely pedestrian lane leading to the market is Rue Sade, with more shops, restaurants, and bars. The market is very easy to find in this small old town. It's just a few blocks from the main square. It's a covered produce market. In here you'll find piles and piles of local fruits and vegetables. There's the greens, there's the tomatoes, lots of potatoes, plenty of locals out. Of course, the south of France is famous for its food markets, and this is one of the best. And especially convenient because it's open every day. In the mornings, it opens from about 6 a.m. and goes strong until about 1 p.m. In the off-season, it closes on Mondays. The high season being from June 1st to September 1st, it's open 7 days a week. And it's just a lot of fun. Olives are the heart of the Mediterranean cuisine and come in a wide variety of sizes, shapes, colors, and textures, and many different kinds of olive oils and tapenades to go with it. And a favorite is tapenade made from crushed olives. Tapenade, try some of this. You've had tapenade, of course.
Yeah.
It is so good.
This side?
Of course, the merchants are there to sell you things, but they also give away free samples.
This tapenade, black, green, and violet. 3 different olives inside.
They all speak some English, so you can very easily communicate and have a great time.
They have so much. That's what I have is correct.
It's very satisfying to be dealing directly with the farmers and the people who are making these food products. It's a good deal for them, and you're getting a good price as well. And jars of tapenade are easy to pack, and you can bring those home, no problem. The olive tree was first planted in the area by the Greeks 2,500 years ago, and it's been thriving ever since, as has the other produce with the sunny climate, mild temperatures, and the stony soil. Perfect combination for agriculture. You probably are not cooking food on your vacation, and you just wandered into the market to have a look and take a few pictures maybe, and you will be tempted to purchase some of the fruits. There's nuts, there's other kinds of snack foods.
Cranberries?
And there's cafes around the market stalls as well. So it just makes the perfect spot to wander, take in the aromas, talk to some locals, and get some good food. You might pick up some fresh fruits as a snack, but even if you're not purchasing anything, it's always a delight to wander through a local food market, especially when you're in Provence. A wide variety of fresh and locally grown herbs will really delight your senses. The odor is so light and wonderful. They also have plenty of spices here, piles and piles of colorful spices, some of them brought in from Africa. And good news, the market is open every day in the summertime. starting from as early as 6 a.m. and generally going till about 1 p.m. And the rest of the year, it's open every day except Mondays. So this is a very regular market that you're sure to catch. In such a beautiful outdoor setting, semi-covered, you've got a roof overhead with the open air and lots of locals streaming around. There's flowers for sale, colors everywhere. It's just a great spot to visit and to take a lot of pictures. And then in the afternoon, this same covered market hall becomes a crafts market with the same kind of hours. So whether you're here in the morning or later in the afternoon, there's always something to see. There are several clothing markets in town located in different places around the village depending on the day. So you should be able to find it. They happen most every day. And usually they run from 7 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a little down market, but it's fun to browse and fun to check out the locals getting their goods. Just 1 block over from the food market, you'll find the oldest part of Antibes with the cathedral and an old palace, now the Picasso Museum, and some peaceful residential pedestrian lanes. We're going to take you on an extensive walking tour throughout this area. The oldest existing structures stand on the highest point of the rock facing the sea. One of the oldest buildings in town is the Church of the Immaculate Conception. This is a medieval church that was first built from the 12th century. It's believed to be on the site of a much earlier Greek temple, and perhaps some stones from the ancient Romans were used in its construction. It had been the town cathedral in the early days, and it's highly decorated inside with some artworks from the Renaissance and the Baroque periods, with the Romanesque-style architecture on the interior reflecting its medieval heritage. It's a beautiful place to stop in and sit down and have a rest. There's no admission charge to the church, and it's open throughout the day. Plus, there's comfortable benches. You can just sit down and rest here, cool off a little bit, and enjoy the scenic surroundings. With the beautiful paintings and sculpture, it's like an art museum. And for the religious visitor, a great place to say a prayer. And next door, there is a large Picasso museum in the Grimaldi Palace here in the center, where the artist had a studio that's now incorporated into the museum. And today, a large group of well-behaved school kids was visiting the museum. Antibes was famous as a home for artists in the 20th century, Picasso in particular, who lived here in 1946 and spent most of his later life elsewhere in Provence. Picasso donated 22 of his paintings to the museum, which also has works by other important artists of the modern movement. This Grimaldi castle was first inhabited in 1385 by that noble family from Monaco, the Grimaldis, who actually ruled over a very large area here along the shores of Provence and inland. It's believed that earlier this was the Greek center of the ancient Greek city about 2,500 years ago. Antibes was first founded by the Greeks and then later built up by the Romans, and this was their center. There are a handful of other museums and many art galleries in Antibes as well. That pretty well covers a lot of the main attractions of Antibes, but there's always more to see. There's this residential neighborhood right beyond the museum that's worth a little stroll. It's quite easy to find this small residential neighborhood. You just keep walking past the Picasso Museum, and you're going to go right into it. 2 parallel streets and a few little side connecting alleys. And frankly, it's not a really exciting place to visit. I wouldn't put it at the top of the list of things to see in Antibes. But if you've got 2 hours at least to look around the town, you'll certainly have time for this little detour. You could just take 10-15 minutes for this kind of a wander, and it's fun to see how the locals live. This cat's having a bit of a limp here, but he has no trouble scaling right up this rocky staircase. It's easy to find your way out of this small residential neighborhood because just a few blocks over you have returned to the little commercial district of the old town with the beautiful streets lined with the shops and the cafes. They'll look familiar, but there are a whole number of streets that you might not have seen yet. So please just go wander around some more, and even if you're going down the same street again, it'll look different the second or third time around. Inevitably, you'll return again to the main pedestrian shopping lane, the Rue de la République, and it is always worth a look. It's a little bit more modern than the narrow lanes of the old town, with lots of great shops. The street is always busy with pedestrians, mostly locals out for a stroll, and the odd scooter, but there's no cars allowed. You can see this sense of community and relations gets well established in a small town like Antibes with these extended families and friends. You're going to find that the locals are friendly even if they don't speak much English. We are winding down our visit. We've seen the great highlights of this beautiful town, but don't leave yet. We have lots more to show you. And maybe you'd like to stop and get some gelato. You know, there's some Italian influence still here yet. Of course, you can find gelato all over the world. It comes out of Italy, naturally, but this whole southern coastline of the Riviera had been Italian until 150 years ago. If you only had 2 or 3 hours, you could see most of what we've shown you in this episode about Antibes, walking around. There's a lot to see. But if you had a little more time, you could just keep walking. And so let's go back into the old town. Give us 5 more minutes and we're going to show you some more as we continue enjoying the beautiful scenes of Antibes. I'm going to fill you in on a lot of the history of this area. So we're going to be wandering through the town. We'll be revisiting a few of the streets and markets that we've shown you earlier in the program. And as we go, you'll learn how this place came to be. The area has been controlled for over thousands of years by many different competing cultures who imposed their own political and trading systems for the control of Mediterranean commerce. Now, no doubt there was prehistoric fishermen and farmers who were living in this area for thousands of years, but the written history begins about 2,500 years ago, starting with a group called the Phocians, who came in from Marseille. Ultimately, they were an ancient Greek culture, and they constructed here in Antibes a frontier fortress to protect them from the aggressive Ligurian tribes of Genoa to the east. A proof of the early Greek origin has been established with the discovery of some stones inscribed with archaic Greek characters. Of course, hardly any traces remain of the Greek town. Antipolis was the name of the area at the time. They were then followed by Phoenicians and then by Greeks, Romans, Gauls, Carthaginians, and later Teutonic tribes, Franks, Saracens, Spanish, and then Italians. It became a very strong Italian culture for hundreds of years, and then finally the French. And now we have a constant international invasion by tourists. Well, since the days of the ancient Greeks, Antibes has been a frontier fortress. Ruins of fortifications of the succeeding centuries show that the town has always been on this same site on the coast east of the Cape looking towards Nice. This seaport has had an almost uninterrupted existence since the 4th or 5th century before Christ, continuously inhabited. The ancient Greek wanderers from antiquity found on these western shores some natural features that were quite similar to their own native land back in Greece. The same kind of picturesque mountain scenery, the fertile valleys that were wonderful for growing olives and grapes, a fine climate, and the varied coastlines of those sharp projections and deep recesses, just like along the shores of Greece. Well, after establishing a colony at Massilia, which is modern-day Marseille, these Greek ancestors proceeded from there to found Nice and then Antibes. There can be no doubt that in the time of the Romans, the town had aqueducts, baths, theaters, features typical of a Roman city with its many public edifices. It was indeed famous for the beauty of its monuments. It possessed a highly efficient school of navigation, and traces of Roman graves are still occasionally found, as well as carved stones and inscriptions, mosaics, and coins. It was formerly the headquarters of the army during the Roman occupation. The later history of the town of Antibes is a very stirring one. It was destroyed by the Goths in 473. That was part of the fall of Rome. The entire Roman Empire fell apart, conquered largely by the Goth invaders. And it shared the same fate at the hands of the Lombards 100 years later in 578. The Saracens held possession of it for many years during the 7th century. They were the Muslim invaders from northern Africa and the East. In 1522, Antibes was taken by the Constable Bourbon, the French influence, and in 1536 it was sacked by Charles V of Spain. The Duke of Savoy seized it in 1707, and 40 years later it was bombarded by the English, and in 1813 by the Austrians. You can see it's such a desirable piece of land, everybody was fighting over it. Only after Napoleon III seized the district of Nice as part payment for French intervention in the Italian War of Liberation was that familiar term French Riviera gradually extended to include the coast as far west as Antibes. What was added to France under Napoleon III then lost its previous Italian character. People here had been speaking Italian and largely identifying with the main Italian society, but after Napoleon III, everything switched to French. It took a while. When done with your visit to Antibes, it's easy to find the train station if that's how you're departing, and you don't have to walk back exactly the way you came along the Marina. You can do an interesting stroll from that Placa National over to Place General de Gaulle, and then you turn right and walk 5 blocks along Avenue Robert Solot back to the train station. It's quite easy, and there's things to see along this route which brings you into the modern part of Antibes. And now we really are departing Antibes, taking our train back to Nice. The train service along the Riviera is really fantastic. The trains come every 15 to 25 minutes depending on time of day, and it just takes 25 minutes to go from Antibes back to Nice by train. Now here's a suggestion on your ticket purchase. You can buy a one-day pass that's only currently €15 per person, and that's good for unlimited travel on the rail for one day in the Riviera region. That's a good bargain. It also makes it a lot easier at the station. You don't have to be hassling buying tickets every time you're getting on the train. Typical of the French, they'll bring their dogs everywhere, on the train, in the restaurants. It's part of the family. Well, that wraps up our visit to Antibes. You can see it's one of the great towns of the French Riviera. Of course, there's many great places to visit down here in the south of France. You've got Cannes and the great city of Nice, Monaco, Vence, Villefranche, Saint-Paul-de-Vence, and others, all of which we've covered in our series of movies about the Mediterranean, so be sure to take a look. It takes less than half hour to get from Antibes back to Nice, and it's a scenic ride along the shoreline for the most part. You get beautiful views of the blue Mediterranean. You'll find that staying in Nice is a perfect solution for seeing the Riviera, because there are many hotels in Nice. There's a lot to see in Nice, as we've shown you in other programs, and it's so easy to get around by train and also by public bus. You can see all the little towns and villages of the Riviera very easily. The Nice train station is right in town, and within a few blocks you're on the main boulevard, so you don't waste any time. We have many more movies to show you about the Riviera and Provence in our 1,000 movie collection of the great sights of Europe. Take a look.